The evidence envelope had been sitting in the Massachusetts State Police Laboratory for nearly 2 decades when Detective Maria Santos first heard about genetic genealogy. It was March 2023, and the technique that had revolutionized cold case investigations across the country was finally being applied to one of Boston's most perplexing unsolved murders. The victim was Jennifer Walsh, a 28-year-old graduate student at Harvard who disappeared while jogging through Cambridge Common on a foggy October evening in 2006. Her body was discovered 3 days later in a wooded area near Fresh Pond. But despite an intensive investigation involving multiple agencies, her killer had never been identified. Detective Robert Chen, now retired, had led the original investigation with methodical precision. The crime scene yielded frustratingly little physical evidence, partial DNA profile extracted from biological material found on the victim's clothing. But no matches in CODIS, the national DNA database used to identify known criminals. We worked that case for months, Chen recalls. Interviewed hundreds of people, followed every lead. The DNA was our best evidence, but in 2006, if you weren't in the system, you were a ghost. The investigation had consumed the Cambridge Police Department's resources for nearly a year. Chen's team had explored every angle. Jennifer's academic work studying environmental policy, her part-time job at a local bookstore, her dating life, her family relationships. They found no enemies, no stalkers, no obvious motive for someone to want her dead. The case gradually went cold as new investigations demanded attention and resources. Jennifer's parents, Dr. Michael Walsh and Professor Sarah Walsh, both academics themselves, never stopped pressing for answers. They hired private investigators, offered rewards, and kept their daughter's case in the public eye through annual memorial runs in Cambridge Common. In early 2023, the Massachusetts State Police Cold Case Unit began partnering with genetic genealogy companies to review unsolved cases with viable DNA evidence. Detective Santos, who had joined the unit after years working sex crimes, was assigned to review the Walsh case. The science behind forensic genealogy represents a revolution in criminal investigation. Unlike traditional DNA analysis, which requires exact matches from criminal databases, genetic genealogy uses the same techniques, employed by ancestry websites to build family trees and identify potential suspects through their relatives. The killer doesn't have to be in any database, Santos explains. If their second cousin uploaded their DNA to find their great-grandfather's immigration records, we can potentially identify our suspect through that family connection. The process began with uploading the crime scene DNA profile to GEDmatch, a public database used by genetic genealogy researchers. Within weeks, the profile had generated several potential family matches, distant cousins who shared enough genetic material to suggest a common ancestor. Santos worked with genetic genealogist Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a former academic who had transitioned into forensic consulting. Together, they began constructing family trees for each potential match, working backward through generations to identify common ancestors, then forward to map out all possible descendants. It's like solving a massive puzzle, Martinez explains. We're looking for that point where multiple family lines converge, then identifying every male descendant who would have been the right age and in the right location. In 2006, the process consumed months of painstaking research. Birth records, death certificates, marriage licenses, immigration documents, census date. Every piece of information that could place individuals in specific times and locations became crucial evidence. One family tree proved particularly promising. The genetic marker suggested the perpetrator was likely descended from Patrick O'Brien, an Irish immigrant who had arrived in Boston in 1847. O'Brien's descendants had spread throughout New England, but several branches remained concentrated in the Boston metropolitan area. By August 2023, Santos and Martinez had identified 17 possible suspects, men aged 25 to 45 in 2006, who lived within reasonable driving distance of Cambridge Common. The investigation now shifted to traditional detective work, checking alibis, employment records, criminal histories, and any connections to Harvard or Cambridge. Most suspects were quickly eliminated. Traffic tickets that placed them in other states on the night of the murder. Hospital records showing medical procedures, work schedules that accounted for their whereabouts. One by one, the list shrunk. The breakthrough came when Santos discovered that one suspect, David Michael Chen, no relation to the original detective, had worked as a maintenance contractor for Harvard University from 2005 to 2007. His employment records showed he had access to buildings throughout the campus and often worked evening shifts that ended near Cambridge Common. Chen, now 45 and living in New Hampshire, had no serious criminal record. Just a couple of traffic violations and a domestic disturbance call that hadn't resulted in charges. He worked as an automotive mechanic and lived quietly with his wife and 2 children. Santos needed a DNA sample to confirm the genetic genealogy findings. In September 2023, undercover officers collected a discarded coffee cup from Chen's usual morning stop at a Dunkin' Donuts near his workplace. The sample was rushed to the state laboratory for comparison with the 2006 crime scene evidence. The results were unambiguous. The DNA profile was a perfect match. On October 15, 2023, 17 years and 15 days after Jennifer Walsh's murder, Massachusetts State Police arrested David Chen at his home in Manchester, New Hampshire. He was charged with first-degree murder and transported to Cambridge, where he was held without bail, pending trial. Chen initially maintained his innocence, claiming he had never met Jennifer Walsh and knew nothing about her murder. But confronted with the DNA evidence and documentation of his presence in Cambridge in 2006, his story began to unravel. During his third interview, Chen finally admitted to the killing. He described following Jennifer during her evening jog, attacking her when she took a path that led away from well-lit areas, and killing her during a sexual assault that had escalated beyond his original intentions. He was a predator of opportunity, Santos says. Jennifer was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. If it hadn't been her, it would have been someone else, eventually. Chen's confession revealed details about the crime that had never been released to the public, confirming investigators' belief that they had finally identified Jennifer's killer. The Walsh case represents the power and potential of forensic genealogy, a field that has revolutionized cold case investigations since its first major success in identifying the Golden State Killer in 2018. The technique works by comparing crime scene DNA with genetic profiles in public databases used by people researching their ancestry. When distant relatives upload their genetic information, it creates a network of family connections that skilled genealogists can map to identify potential suspects. Genetic genealogy doesn't just solve individual cases, explains Dr. Martinez. It's changing the entire landscape of criminal investigation. Perpetrators who thought they had gotten away with their crimes decades ago are discovering that their DNA is no longer their secret alone. The ethical implications of the technique continue to generate debate. Privacy advocates worry about the use of genetic information provided for genealogical research being used in criminal investigations. Law enforcement argues that the technique simply uses publicly available information to identify suspects, who must still be confirmed through traditional DNA analysis and proven guilty beyond reasonable doubt in court. David Chen was convicted of first-degree murder in February 2024 and sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Jennifer Walsh's parents attended every day of the trial, finally receiving the answers they had sought for nearly 2 decades. "We never gave up hope," says Dr. Walsh. "Jennifer was brilliant and kind, and she deserved better than to become a cold case file. Genetic genealogy gave us something we thought we might never have: the truth about what happened to our daughter." The Walsh case has since become a teaching example in forensic genealogy courses, demonstrating how patient scientific work can bridge the gap between advanced genetic analysis and traditional investigative techniques. For Detective Santos, the case represents both the promise and the responsibility of modern criminal investigation. "We have these incredible tools now," she reflects, "but they're only as good as the people using them, and they can't bring back the victims or undo the pain their families have endured." As genetic genealogy techniques continue to evolve, law enforcement agencies across the country are reviewing thousands of cold cases that might benefit from this approach. The Walsh case demonstrates that even cases with minimal physical evidence can potentially be solved if that evidence contains viable genetic material. The technique has already led to arrests in hundreds of cold cases nationwide, providing closure for families who had given up hope of ever learning the truth about their loved ones' deaths. As genetic databases continue to grow, and genealogical techniques become more sophisticated, even older and more challenging cases may finally yield their secrets. The Cambridge Common, where Jennifer Walsh took her final jog in October 2006, remains a popular destination for runners and dog walkers. A small memorial garden planted near the path she traveled that night serves as a reminder that even in places where terrible things happen, justice and remembrance can eventually flourish. The silent witnesses preserved in crime scene evidence may remain quiet for years or even decades. But as the Walsh case demonstrates, they never stopped telling their stories to those with the patience and tools to listen.